My name is Ryan Carter 36, and for the past 12 years I thought I knew everything about marriage, about love, about Emily, my wife. She had always been vibrant, a spark that made ordinary mornings feel like a celebration. But last Friday that spark left something behind that neither of us could ignore. It started innocently enough. Emily had been invited to her cousin's wedding in Boston. Girls' weekend, she called it. I tried not to overthink it. After all, she had gone to countless weddings, parties, and dinners. I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. She packed her suitcase meticulously, humming to herself, choosing outfits that had me smiling in admiration. That night, I kissed her goodbye at the door, feeling the warmth of her perfume linger in the hallway long after she left. The first 2 days were normal enough. I went to work, ran errands, and texted her sporadically. A picture here, a casual having fun there. She replied with small emojis, sometimes a line or two about dresses, wine, or catching up with friends. But by Sunday evening, I began noticing little cracks. Emily's texts started getting cryptic, vague, almost teasing in a way that felt unfamiliar. A joke here, a subtle compliment on someone else's post there. My chest tightened with a mix of unease and suspicion. When she finally returned home Monday night, the air between us felt heavy in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The house smelled faintly of roses, something from the wedding venue, but beneath it was a subtle perfume I didn't recognize. Emily walked in, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, a smile that didn't quite reach them. She dropped her bags in the hallway and leaned against the doorframe. "You're home," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Yes," she replied softly, shrugging off her coat. Boston was exhausting but amazing. Her tone was calm, but her body language told a different story. She was jittery in the smallest ways, fingers tapping, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, glancing at me as if evaluating my mood. I offered her a drink, trying to bridge the invisible gap between us, but she declined, saying she wanted a shower first. I followed her into the bedroom an hour later, hoping to reconnect in the way we used to, simple, intimate conversation before bed, but I stopped at the doorway. The way she moved, almost unaware of my presence, the faint blush on her cheeks, and the distant look in her eyes made something click inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a strange icy clarity. Something was off. Something had changed. Over the next few days, the difference became impossible to ignore. Emily laughed less at my jokes, brushed off compliments, and avoided touch in a way that went beyond tiredness or preoccupation. She seemed to float in a separate world, a parallel reality I was no longer allowed to enter. I tried talking to her gently. "Did something happen at the wedding?" I asked one evening, keeping my voice careful and neutral. She froze mid-step, eyes narrowing slightly before she forced a polite smile. "Ryan, it was a wedding. That's all. Why are you overthinking it?" The words stung, but not as much as the dismissal in her gaze. I realized then that this wasn't about the wedding itself. This was about her, about us, about how I had spent 12 years thinking we were in sync, only to discover I was alone in a marriage that had quietly shifted beneath my feet. It was Wednesday night when the breaking point arrived. I came home early, hoping to surprise her with dinner. A small gesture just to feel connected again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that screams in your ears. I found Emily in the living room, scrolling through her phone. Her laughter was low and sudden, almost hidden. And then I saw it. A photo barely noticeable. A close-up of her laughing with a man whose arm was draped over her shoulders. Not a friend, not someone casual. A man I didn't know. My heart stopped. I felt the floor shift beneath me. I wanted to confront her, yell, demand an explanation, but my mouth went dry. Instead, I watched in silence as the truth slowly unraveled itself in a single fleeting image. For the next hour we barely spoke. I prepared a simple plate of food and ate alone in the kitchen while she sat on the couch, occasionally glancing at me but never meeting my eyes. Every fiber of my being screamed betrayal, humiliation, shock. And yet there was something in me that stayed calm. A clarity I didn't expect. I knew what I had to do, but I waited, giving myself time to process the full gravity of the moment. By Thursday morning I had made up my mind. 12 years, countless memories, laughter, shared dreams, and moments of intimacy. All of it felt hollow in the face of what had been revealed. It wasn't just about a fling, a lapse in judgment, or momentary excitement. It was about her choosing someone else, silently, without confrontation, without acknowledgement of what we had shared. I sat at the kitchen table in our house on Maple Street in Denver, pen and paper in hand, staring at the blank page, and realized I didn't need to write a long explanation. I didn't need anger, justification, or revenge. All I needed was truth, my own. I grabbed my phone, opened my email, and began the process that would end the marriage with the quiet dignity I intended to preserve. By the end of that day, divorce papers were being drafted. Not in haste, not in panic, but in absolute clarity. The woman I had once loved deeply now faced a reality I could no longer ignore. Emily had returned with more than memories from that wedding. And for the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt a strange sense of freedom begin to bloom. The last look I gave her that evening was brief, measured, and final. No words, no accusations, just recognition of a truth that had become unavoidable. And with that, I stepped into the next chapter of my life, unsure where it would lead but certain that I would not look back. Thursday night passed in an eerie quiet. Emily barely touched her dinner, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I sat across from her, calm and measured, letting the storm inside me simmer without exploding. I had made my decision, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of watching me crumble. By Friday morning, reality hit harder than I expected. Emily was busy packing for a supposed work trip to Seattle she had mentioned only casually, but something in her demeanor screamed deception. The glances over her shoulder, the hurried motions, the faint smirk when she thought I wasn't watching. I observed carefully, noting every detail. Something was off. I went through our shared calendars and messages subtly, without letting suspicion show. That's when I discovered the truth. A truth that felt like a punch to the gut. Emily hadn't gone to Boston alone. The man in the photo was someone she had known for years, a friend she had described countless times, always laughing about his quirky jokes. But this weekend had changed everything. They hadn't just been friends at a wedding. There had been laughter, wine, whispers, and moments she thought were hidden. Moments she had assumed I'd never find out about. The realization sent a chill through me. Not just for the betrayal but for the audacity. 12 years of marriage, shared trust, and she returned from a weekend with her eyes glazed with excitement, holding secrets I wasn't supposed to know. I felt a quiet fury, the kind that doesn't yell but burns steadily, reshaping every thought. I decided to confront her but carefully. Not in anger, not in public, not with accusation. I waited until evening, when she had returned from her errands. The living room was dim, curtains drawn, the faint smell of her perfume lingering. I sat on the couch, hands folded, watching her as she hung her coat. "Ryan," she started, sensing the tension. "You've been quiet." "Yes," I replied, my voice calm and low. "I've been thinking about the weekend." Her eyes flickered. A nervous tick, a sign she sensed I knew more than she had admitted. "I know," I continued. "Everything." The silence that followed was suffocating. Her shoulders stiffened, her gaze darting around as if searching for an escape. "Everything," she whispered, almost inaudible. "Yes," I said. "I saw the photo, Emily. I know who you were with. I know what happened." Her face went pale, lips parting then closing, searching for words. She opened her mouth, closed it again, swallowed, muttered something about a misunderstanding, and finally broke down. The confession came slowly, haltingly. She had felt neglected, she said, lonely, craving attention I hadn't realized she needed. The man had listened, admired her, made her feel special. It had started with small jokes, laughter, shared glances. By the wedding weekend, she admitted, it had become more than she intended. More than just memories. I listened in silence, absorbing every word. But what struck me most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the calmness with which she spoke of it, as if it were a minor indiscretion rather than a rupture of 12 years of shared life. When she paused, expecting some reaction, I leaned back, folded my arms, and said something she didn't expect. "I see. Thank you for telling me the truth. But I can't stay." Her eyes widened, disbelief and panic mingling in a gaze I once found comforting. "Stay, Ryan. We can fix this. I made a mistake. It meant nothing. Please, we can work it out." I shook my head slowly. "Emily, it's not about a single weekend or a single mistake. It's about the foundation of trust. And that foundation has been fractured. For me, it's over." I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I didn't cry. I simply stood, went to the drawer, pulled out the divorce papers I had drafted the night before, and placed them on the coffee table. I filed, I said quietly. It's done. This isn't about anger. It's about accepting reality. You chose this path and I'm choosing mine. She collapsed onto the couch, face in her hands, silent sobs filling the room. I didn't move. I didn't add anything. I let her absorb the consequences of her choices, just as she had let me absorb hers. Over the next few days, I took care of the details quietly and efficiently. I contacted my lawyer, ensured accounts were separated, and documented everything. Emily alternated between pleading, apologizing, and blaming. But I maintained the calmness I had discovered in the aftermath of betrayal. There was a strange liberation in it, the kind that comes from reclaiming control, from stepping out of a life that no longer honored your value. By the end of the second week, Emily moved out, leaving behind clothes, memories, and 1,000 silent conversations we would never have. I sat in the empty living room one night, the quiet almost surreal, and realized something profound. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and full of clarity. I didn't celebrate. I didn't rejoice. But I felt the weight lift, the heavy burden of unacknowledged betrayal replaced by the sharp, clean edge of truth. And for the first time in months I felt awake, alive, and in charge of my life again. Emily had come back from a wedding with more than memories. But I was leaving with something far more valuable. A future I could finally face without compromise, without illusions, and without compromising my own self-respect. The past was gone, but the lessons remained.